Resident Evil 3 was developed by Capcom, and at the time, living the high life of the success of Resident Evil, the first installment, and Resident Evil 2 with Leon and Claire. Resident Evil 3 was part of multiple projects that were being planned at the time. In particular, was being produced by Shinji Mikami and was being worked on and directed by Hideki Kamiya for the next installment. At the time, the game itself was actually a preconceived concept of taking place on a cruise ship and would involve Hunk attempting to bring back a sample of the G virus in relation to Resident Evil 2. At the time, multiple projects being developed by Capcom would get a shift and change around, especially with the announcement of PlayStation 2. And there was some timing element to it where Capcom wanted to have some of these projects out way before the PlayStation 2 launch. So it promoted and changed things. And in essence, the team that was selected for Resident Evil 3 with this concept canceled the project and moved on to Resident Evil 4. They considered Resident Evil 3 more of a spin-off, which was actually developed by another team that was a little less experienced, but was led by director Katsuro Oyama, and was intended to introduce a new character to Escape, but during the concept, eventually the protagonist of Jill Valentine, the main character, would be decided to be included with Resident Evil 3. The script for Capcom's Resident Evil 3 concept wasn't actually also done by those with the massive experience and success that we know and love. And it was done by more of a less experienced team that was internal to Capcom. This particular writer was known as Yasushi Kawamaru, and who had little experience with Resident Evil. Of course, with the continuing development, this would end up being the final product of Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, which is then focused on our protagonist that everybody knows and loves of Jill Valentine, the machine expert from STAR's Alpha team that actually escaped the events of Resident Evil 1. In this particular story, it would change up where Jill was actually being sought after, stalked, and hunted by Nemesis, hence the name Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, with an emphasis of the antagonist. According to some accounts and sources, they designed the game so that, one, it can also use the previous engine, but a little bit more optimized, so even have even more enemies appear at the same time, with the 2D images and 3D. The Nemesis was actually inspired by Liquid Metal T-1000 from Terminator 2 and Judgment Day. And being produced by Shinji Mikami, he went on quote to mention that as the player in playing this particular game, you wanted to have the feeling that you were being stalked and paranoid, and ensuring that you're dreading the idea of the next attack, which could happen at any moment, and anything in itself is not safe. This in itself internally, Resident Evil 3 was indicated as more of a Biohazard 1.5, not to be confused with the 1.5 demo of Resident Evil 2, as it's supposed to take place between the first two Resident Evil games of Resident Evil 1 and Resident Evil 2. The development itself was indicated that it started with a team of 20 people, with all the changes and updates would end up growing to about 50 staff members. This in and of itself would also have Resident Evil 3 Nemesis on a single disc released for the PlayStation 1. Resident Evil 3 Nemesis itself would also go on to be ported to PC, GameCube, and a number of other platforms, eventually kind of making its remake that we know today, Resident Evil 3 Remake itself. So let's take a look at this nice piece of history as we look at the jewel case, the instructions, the discs, and also the number of variants and things that came with this release. Now, this Resident Evil 3 Nemesis Black Label copy does not include a demo of Dino Crisis. For, I believe, the first 500,000 copies did include a copy of a Dino Crisis demo, which is also the only variant that you'll see with the actual emblem here. And surprisingly enough, in Dino Crisis, it actually has the Resident Evil 3 Nemesis demo included, which we will look at here in just a moment. But as you can see with this particular disc, we have the face, which looks pretty grotesque and horrifying, at least at the time when this was released, of Nemesis' face in a very dark background with some windows and some, city skyline of some ladders, some platforms and stuff on the side of some of these apartment buildings, and I would assume would be Raccoon City, since the entire game takes place in it. Of course, you can actually see the different parts of the biological portion of Nemesis with his exposed teeth, his stitched face, and also kind of the vines and tentacles that he actually uses in the game itself. The actual text of Resident Evil 3 also changes, a little bit wildly different, as it shows kind of a shattering effect with stretching and emphasis, and a red Nemesis with a more biohazard theme at the bottom. Of course, in other places of the world, Biohazard 3 is known as Biohazard 3 The Last Escape, emphasizing the escape of Jill Valentine as she's trying to leave Raccoon City. Notice the normal same PlayStation 1 spine on the back, or on the side, and on the back it actually has a full emphasis shown of Jill Valentine with her crop attire, skirt, and also sweater that she ties around her waist. With the tagline, "It's in your blood," just days after surviving the grisly disaster at the Mansion Lab, Jill Valentine resigns from STARS and attempts to escape a nightmare city in ruins. Trapped in a town crawling with hordes of flesh-eating zombies, hideous mutants, and a relentless new nemesis, she must rely on cunning, brute force to stay alive. What she soon discovers, the evil created by Umbrella Corporation's biotech terror, is even more horrifying than she ever imagined. Some secrets come back to haunt you. Showing the 3 screenshots of the game, with the first one showing close to the subway with the fire that's exploding, her dodging about 2 zombies, I believe, in the Raccoon City streets, as well as the third one when she's about to meet Brad Vickers into the bar, taking care of the zombies on the stairway. And again, emphasis in the background, more apartment building windows, grates, ladders, and metallic residents of the city itself, indicating here, with also 1 player, 1 block of memory, analog control compatible, and a vibration function compatible as well. So this also includes everything with the DualShock version, as there really wasn't multiple versions of Resident Evil 3 actually in release. Seeing the Jill that we see here, she's a bit more confident, a bit more intense, and a bit more intimidating, even though she looks very attractive and nice by showing a little extra skin, versus her full STARS utility outfit that she was wearing, emphasizing more of her being a police officer. Even though she was part of STARS, and it indicates that she was resigned from STARS, she certainly fulfills her expertise in this particular game, even though she's not wearing the appropriate attire. As we open this up, we first look at the disc here, which has Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, with Nemesis's face and more of his tentacles as per usual. The same black, shiny coat on the back of the disc. And then we also have a shot of Jill's face in a super high contrast background with Nemesis there, standing there in front, which could ultimately mean the destruction of Raccoon City, as it shows a little bit of the apartments here. Or this could be just an emphasis of saying, this is us at the dawn if you were to survive. Or it could emphasize that Jill is already perished and died, and the person that sent her to her salvation is Nemesis. However, keep an eye on this particular picture, as we're going to see this again in the import versions of Resident Evil 3 Biohazard 3. If we look at the instruction manual, it's actually still very much similar. In some ways, there's some differences. Still having a Capcom special message for saying thank you for playing, as it did in the last few installments that we've seen here. The picture of Nemesis in the background, and then it's indicating the intro of Resident Evil 3 with Trapped, and Jill's journal entry that she indicates that it all began as an ordinary day in September. No one dared to oppose Umbrella, and the lack of strength would ultimately lead to the city's destruction. If only they had the courage to fight, and so on and so forth. Now it's Raccoon City's last chance, and my last chance, my last escape. On the right here, it indicates all the new features that are included, which has, player actions, which we're used to, drawing of the weapon, and that isn't really new, but dodging, the quick 180, are new features that were included in this version of this game, as you can press R1 or R2 the moment an enemy attacks, and you can actually dodge those attacks, and even do a quick counter attack depending on how you're doing, how much ammo and weapon you're wielding. Of course, it indicates here in parentheses, you cannot dodge when you're severely injured. The quick 180 turn, which you can push the reverse on the directional button or down, and the square button at the same time. Climbing and descending stairs is also new, as there was only a brief moment or two that you were able to actually climb and descend stairs in Resident Evil 2. However, it was just a portion of the stairs you climb up on, as you still would have to go through the loading sequence, and in some cases a automated climb and descent feature of going up and down the stairs in the previous one. While this one, it allows you to actually move up and down the stairs seamlessly. Mixing ammo was also an included feature in this. And then the maps, which we've had the maps before, but this is much bigger as you're going across Raccoon City. The other thing too was the live selection, which would give an indication of quick time events, but in this case it was a little bit more warranted, as it wasn't a set of instructions of buttons to select, but it was a choice you had to make, which would ultimately change the way that your game would play out. And even in some cases, the third option, not even selecting a choice, is also a choice in itself. And it does affect how your character will deal with it, which would be Jill in this case. Sometimes Carlos or others. This shows a bit more about setting up everything with the memory card and how many slots of memory is required, as well as the controls similarly of what we discussed. So one thing to note is that when it comes to this particular game, this indicates it's just days after surviving that Jill is at this point and resigning from STARS in order to move along, while the prologue for this, which has a little bit of a difference here, is indicating it's a month and a half since the incident from the mansion. And now we've moved on to September. So that in itself is two very different timelines, and where Jill Valentine could be in her journey. It seems very intense and adaptive of her to be able to go from one emergency into the next, as it goes from the mansion as small ways of saving herself and others to get through the incident, and then going into Raccoon City on a widespread. So this indicates a bit more of how the prologue is occurring, where people are starting to forget the chaos of the mansion as their everyday lives return, and in the Arclay Mountains. So the destruction of the STARS, Special Task Force STARS, Umbrella Corporation's secret biological weapons laboratory, the power of the T-virus and all of that went on the wayside, and indicating the question of how it could happen here. People could not believe the survivors' reports, as they were kind of put off and also kind of disbarred a bit, especially from the chief of police, Brian Irons. Of course, with all this happening at the same time, there are a number of STARS survivors from the team members indicating that they were going to Europe. Chris would be one of them, indicating that in his journal entry to Claire that she would run into in the STARS room. And there's really no major significance other than saying that there might be a facility in Europe to address. But other than that, there's not much in the way of, hey, we're going to Europe, and the reasoning behind it. And then, just like in a flash, after everyone, even that was surviving that, was hoping it was all over, a number of inexplicable murders occurred. Strong disease started to spread, and T-virus was now flowing into the city. Recalling the events from Resident Evil 2 with Hunk's team, the G-virus also was spreading, included with that, as the team was kind of injured and destroyed and killed, with the rats taking the remains, feasting off them, and transferring and infecting everything as well. And then, yes, Raccoon City was on the brink of collapse. As we remember from the last few games, is of course Jill Valentine, whose age is 23 at the time with blood type of B. In this case, it indicates she's a specialist in disarming explosive traps, not a machine expert like we saw in the first Resident Evil. This also indicates that she has experience training in the US Delta Force. I don't really know what relevance that is in this whole lot, mainly just because the Delta Force isn't really indicated or talked about throughout this particular game very much. Though she has a healthy emotional side, she is a talented woman with a strong will and excellent judgment, which makes sense. And then we have Carlos Oliveira, part of the Umbrella Biohazard Countermeasure Service, UBCS. It's indicated that his particular team had individuals that were either destined for life behind bars, that had a particular expertise that would be used for Umbrella's UBCS force in order to kind of help save face in the way of public view and public knowledge of, and more public of Umbrella, to try to make them look like a more outstanding company and saving any sort of issues or problems they might have had. In this particular case, the UBCS is very much expendable, as indicated throughout the particular game and indicated in several areas. Of course, this is the getting started in game config with new load and game over, which indicates there for either Jill or her partner to be either killed or at a certain point to be done. The game over screen would then appear. Like mentioned before, this has DualShock kind of included, So there is a number of features that are already included with this particular one, with the vibration feature even being included as part of a DualShock controller setup. Same basic actions of using the weapon, get on and off an object, push object, climb and descend stairs, which is new. And then we have the registration card for this particular game, which is nice and included in this. The advanced actions was also kind of highlighted a bit, where you can actually perform dodges, or you can even escape, quick 180 turns, and also the attack objects, which had some combustible objects that you can actually destroy that would cause destruction and mayhem for the zombies, and as well as any other enemies that you face. The status screen should be fairly simple. It is a little bit more optimized, cleaner, and simpler versus the rest of them, with the same items and features that you're used to, even switching between auto and manual for the machine gun weapons that Carlos and UBCS actually has. This has the same item box kind of system as well as the combined items. And then of course the new feature for mixing ammo is also included, where you can actually use different gunpowders to mix in order to make with the reload tool for making handgun, shotgun, grenade bullets, as well as gunpowder and even stronger versions of that. What's really interesting and nice is that as you do create more, your skill will improve, and in certain circumstances you'll even get even more and even more powerful versions of those, with the map file saving, and then also the live selection, which is kind of the prerequisite of quick time events that we're all used to with this game. Changing your partners and moving with your partners are included here. And then of course the end ranking at the end. This also indicates at the end of most of these, especially in the early days, of if you're having trouble or issues, you can't figure out how to either, solve these attacks or even solve puzzles. They of course have a Capcom Edge hint line that you can call in order to get that. With the Capcom Edge system still happening in this particular setup with Resident Evil 3, like it was in 2, you would definitely get some points if you cut this up, and also submitted any sort of information here in order to be included. This, of course, they indicate is the Elite. In order to get all sorts of cool swag like t-shirts, watches, and sunglasses that Capcom was really pushing with Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3 and some of the later versions of Resident Evil 1. So this was the North America release. We'll move on to the Japan version, which we've hinted at a little bit. Obviously, there's going to be some differences here as we see Biohazard 3 Last Escape that has Nemesis right there in front of the same image we saw before that actually had Jill's face on it. Now, what's interesting is they cropped that out to actually show this portion here. What we don't see off screen, which we see here, is him holding on to Brad Vickers, or Chicken Heart Vickers. And because he's doing that, he's actually holding the dead, decapitated body of Vickers. Because as you know, at the Raccoon City Police Department in front, during the CG cutscene, he actually sticks a tentacle through his face, killing him instantly. And in this case, Nemesis is still holding onto that body, using the tentacle to hold onto it as he carries it along, in a very grotesque but in a very non-casual way. On the back here, it actually shows just one major screenshot of Jill Valentine shooting all of the different zombies there. This actually looks like she's got the grenade launcher by the looks of it. So most likely she's shooting a flame round, most likely. or just a regular grenade round itself. With all the usual stuff, which of course I can't read the other language that's included, with the spine of the usual ones that we've seen before. So if we open this up, kind of like similar to how we have in the past, the really nice thing is this actually comes with a bit more documentation information. And this first kind of highlights a biohazard figure, which you might have seen on eBay, that actually sells for a very lot of money for Jill and for Hunk. And then also we've got Biohazard 2 figures with Zippos, with Leon and Claire. And these Zippos are here, and it came with Made in Heaven, that's from Claire, as well as the Raccoon Police emblem, specifically for Raccoon Police for Leon S. Kennedy. A lot more stuff that came included into other things as well. You could get the Biohazard 3 Stars custom soft air gun with air gun, airsoft type of weapons, with the Stars logo on the side, which I will show a bit, as I do have a version of that called the Virus version, which shows the Samurai Edge, which is what is included. This also has the UBCS watch on the right here that they actually wear in the game, which is really cool. Very difficult to find, and I'll be honest, I haven't actually seen that. Biohazard 3 with UBCS of the RPD shirt on the left, which is always fun to have, as well as a snowboard on the right with Made in Heaven and snowboard suits, which I'll be honest, I have yet to ever see that. This is, of course, the registration card that comes included. And then this is actually part of the spine that goes with these versions of any sort of Resident Evil PlayStation games and whatnot, that goes on the spine of this here as part of advertisement in the plastic and sealed itself. I do have a sealed version of this, but that's okay. We're going to go through this unsealed version just to take a look. And of course, their discs are very similar. They're all very generic with a black background with the title and some of the information here, but not as much imagery as we're used to in the North America version. And then of course it's got its own version of the instruction manual, which is really cool and a little bit more explosive in some of the graphics, as you can see. Of course, I can't read most of this, but the images, pictures, and marketing is really cool, kind of highlighting the features that we have here. This is going to be the game config and setup. This is going to be the save system, and also showing all the different mixing and combination features that you have included. This is going to be the item system, also how to combine things, use things, mix herbs. The UI for the options, and of course the mixing of ammo and the gun reloading tool. The map system, the file system, and also the live selection system for quick time events. As well as changing around with having partners and different characters. And then it even highlights a little bit of Dino Crisis here on the end here. Even more swag and good things that we kind of wish we had in the States, as well as highlighting all of the previous versions. As you can see, it's got the top 3 versions of all the different ones. Biohazard, the Director's Cut, the Director's Cut DualShock version, and then of course Biohazard 2 and the DualShock version of that one. And then this is just going to be the warranty piece of paper here that's indicated and included. And now that we have all that, we'll go ahead and close this up as well. Overall, I love the imagery and style of that Japanese version a bit more, in my opinion, as it just explodes out with the images of what it shows. And it's really amazing that they have that. Like I indicated before, for Dino Crisis, and we'll dig in deep with Dino Crisis a bit more, this particular version of Dino Crisis has a Resident Evil 3 Nemesis demo disc CD that comes double-sided. And with Dino Crisis, it was highly kind of bundled together as far as promotion-wise, as it even indicates here. There's also a version of Resident Evil 3 Nemesis that shows the reverse, where this entire badge that is here for Resident Evil 3 is actually for Dino Crisis here with having a demo disc. So, Dino Crisis in of itself has the multiple versions that we've seen, where ones will include the bonus demo disc, and others that do not, as you can see with this one. But we'll focus on Dino Crisis in another video, and then as a bonus, a lot of other things that were sold with Biohazard 3 or Resident Evil 3 Nemesis were a ton of different accessories. In this particular case, I was able to get a hold of a sealed version, which doesn't really mean much. It's just a nice version that I got from overseas of Biohazard 3 Last Escape that actually had a memory card case. They actually branded a jewel case and had it custom made so that you can actually include 4 memory cards included with this jewel case, so that you can actually put this on your shelf with Resident Evil 3 in order to get all the memory cards I'm sure that you're using to highlight. This is really cool as it shows the STARS emblem on it with Capcom. Even though it is a simple piece of plastic that has a nice meaning and purpose to it, it is really a wonderful and amazing thing that you can get nowadays with the branding of Resident Evil 3, which was plastered in a lot of places. I'll be honest, I tried to look for a Resident Evil 3 branded memory card, but it is in the $200 to $300 range, so I'm not going to actually do that or have that for this video. But what's also pretty great is the value of Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, especially the North American version, is starting to go up in value, as it is a pretty rare version of Resident Evil, at least in the Black Label sense. And I've been super happy and very joyous to see kind of the value of Resident Evil versions going up, as the rarity of those are starting to get even harder to find and come to. Well, that was it for Resident Evil 3 Nemesis of the original PlayStation 1 version. Some folks believe this is like one of the greater installments for the original PlayStation 1, and others don't. And I've even heard of some folks that even never played this version of Resident Evil 3, at least until the remake. So, thank you so much for joining. If you could take a second to hit that subscribe and like button, it's greatly appreciated. It won't cost you anything. And feel free to take a look at more notifications of videos in the future. Otherwise, I'll catch you in the next video. Take care.